Hi, welcome to Academic Market Insights. I am Professor Russell Rhodes from the Kelley School of Business, joined by Professor Larissa Adamiec from Purdue University. Uh, she is going to be teaching a personal finance level class in the near future, and we are creating some supplemental videos to go along with that. So, this is part one of 14.
Probably 14. I may
Oh
there
my,
might be
you are
15.
ambitious. So there. This is part one of 14, going through some personal finance issues. I've had a preview, so I've got a couple of questions ready for you. And with that, I'm just going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I can't wait for this one. I think this is a great class. It should be a required class for every student at every university. It's just one of
It
those.
should be in high school. I know I talk over you, and you're a goddess for putting up with it. It should be high school.
Well, I think it should be high school and college.
Yeah, yeah.
It's one of those topics that you should really understand. And if you need to see it more than once, because all of us need to see it more than once, um, I think it's that important.
Oh yeah. No,
Yeah.
I totally. It's a major source of issues with people in adulthood where they just
It
don't have the kind
is.
of financial literacy that they should. So,
And
with that, I'm gonna stop
especially,
talking over you.
well, and as we've talked before, adulting is hard.
Uh,
Figuring out some of this stuff and figuring out what to do. It can be a little challenging. So hopefully this series will help alleviate some of those issues. So again, this is our introductory to this topic. We're going to look at the steps that go into a financial decision, how to analyze economic factors, and everybody's favorite topic, and I mean everybody, the time value of money. It's not your favorite topic, Dr. Rowe?
it's what sets us apart from the accountants.
It is what sets it apart from the accountants. It
I
makes
just
no
made that
sense.
up.
But it is. It's totally because the accountants work. It's if we think about our financial statements, the balance sheet is like a snapshot of what's actually happening as opposed to thinking about what the value is in the future or what a future value is worth to us today. And really, everything in finance comes down to those two ideas. And we're looking at future cash flows. What are they really worth to us today? So, having said that, let's jump in. So our financial decisions are going to revolve around three different things: what we're spending, what we're saving, and what we're sharing. And for a lot of people, or especially if you're younger, you're probably going to be more focused on spending versus and saving versus sharing. So sharing is going to be things like donations. Sharing is going to be what you're maybe planning on leaving to your family member. My children are very into planting and gardening, so we have been sharing some of our financial resources with the great state of Indiana by purchasing some plants, heritage plants that are native to the land and planting them in our yard. But we are giving up our financial resources to promote this organization within the state of Indiana. And then that's what that has to do. But if you don't have disposable income, and I want to make this very clear, if you do not have disposable income, and disposable income is money left over after all your debts have been paid for the month, you should not be sharing. So this is something very, I mean, it's really good to donate and really think of other people. However, if you don't have the resources and you need to be able to pay your electric bill, pay your electric bill.
Got to take
So
care of
that
yourself and your family first.
absolutely. And so that leaves the two other decisions, spending versus saving. And this becomes again problematic if, and we're going to be in our next video talking about setting up a budget, but if you don't have enough resources after you're spent to save, then you're in a situation where that it's you don't even have that decision anymore. It's going to be focused solely on what you're spending. And unfortunately, for a lot of people who are just graduating from undergraduate, they're going to be more focused on how do I spend this money as opposed to what portion do I save. Now, your employer will hopefully have a plan, a retirement plan set up, like an individual retirement account for you, and they will match a percentage of your salary for savings. So you will have some savings. Outside of that, you might also want to think about different types of savings. And again, we'll talk about that more in the next video that we're looking at. But these are the types of decisions we're making when we're looking at our finances. So, how do we go about making a decision? And this becomes an iterative process, and this is very similar to anything that we would be doing in life in general. We'll determine what the current situation is. We'll develop a goal. We'll determine how we can achieve that goal. We'll evaluate the different methodologies for achieving that goal. We'll decide on which methodology we're going to use by implementing the plan, and then we review it and revise as necessary. So, for example, if you're stuck in a financial, and Dr. Rowe and I have talked about this many times, but if you're stuck in a weird financial loop where you don't have enough money to pay a credit card bill, or you just have excess debt and you're looking to get out, one of the alternative courses of actions might be to take a secondary job
Mhm.
until you can finally pay off that excess debt.
Yeah.
Well, you might come to a point where you have achieved the financial goal and you no longer would like to have that second job because you'd like
Yeah.
to go to sleep at some point. And then you would revise and stop at that point and utilize, and then you come up with a new financial goal and figure out how you're going to achieve those goals. So it does become an iterative process depending on what the goal is. And so some of the, oh, I knew you were going to enjoy that. But some of those our financial goals could be, and I apologize for jumping ahead because the next topic is one of Dr. Rowe's favorite topics. And but some of the financial decisions were going to be how to get out of debt, how to save for the future, how to increase our spending on disposable items. Um, do we want to save up to go to Hawaii for the summer? What do we want to do? But those are going to be financial goals that we will be able to discuss and think about how do we methodically get to that goal. So here are some behavioral issues that we need to be aware of. And I'm teasing Dr. Rowe because he is an expert in this field. This is what he has spent quite a bit of his career focused on. And these are different behavioral issues that we often have when we're looking at our finances. So, for example, overconfidence. I'm going to start from the bottom. Overconfidence is when we have these expectations that the markets are going to perform a certain way. We've had some incredibly good years. Last 3 years, what was our average? Like 27% for the rise in
Yeah. Since 2022. Yeah.
yeah, it's huge. And we might be lulled into a false sense that that's going to happen again. We don't know that it won't happen, but we don't want to count on that type of return. A lot of us have FOMO, fear of missing out, so we make poor investments. And this, I'm going to throw this in there, but I also think of FOMO as really the greater fool, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
so
Yeah.
afraid of missing out that we would jump into it, and we're just hoping that there's somebody else that will take the trade off of our hands. So there's lots of different things that we could be concerned about. Is there anyone that jump out to you that
Um, I think in this day and age, the FOMO one really
yeah,
traps people. They hear about their next door neighbor making a ton of money off of semiconductor stocks over the past couple of weeks, and that's something that's been going on as we're recording. And without doing the proper due diligence, et cetera, they buy a semiconductor fund, they buy a handful of semiconductor stocks. Well, when you're trading shorter term like that, and trading on tips, et cetera, the whole idea is that you're going to buy something and then you're going to sell it to somebody else at a higher price. And that's why you use that phrase greater fool theory. But the way that you become the greater fool is being the last person in the FOMO process.
so here, so
Yeah.
if you buy here, You're hoping that it continues, but it could easily, at the same time, start to collapse.
Yeah,
And if you haven't done research, you don't really know or have an anticipation of what's truly going to happen.
exactly. Exactly. And, it's a stock maybe doing particularly well. I'll just use a drug stock example. Due to a new product,
Mm,
somebody says you should buy this drug stock because of, this new therapy that they have out there. At least Google it and see if the therapy's new or if it's been around for 6 months or what. You know,
sure.
it's it's pretty easy to figure out if you're one of the first, one of the last at hearing new news.
Absolutely. So let me get rid of this. We also need to talk about the different types of financial intermediaries. We're looking at banks, insurance companies versus investment companies. So when we think about banks, these are going to be where we have our deposits. Maybe we take a small business loan from here. Our insurance companies are going to be our Allstates, our State Farms. What's the Emu and Limu? My kids love that one. Liberty Mutual. They love the bird commercial.
One of the first things that my oldest daughter ever said to me was, "Hey, Dad, did you know Nationwide is on your side?"
There you go. And you
When she was about
said,
3 or 4, just blurted it out. I'm like, "Oh my goodness!"
you
So,
said, I didn't. Thank you for this great
yeah,
information.
thank you, honey. So, yeah, she repeated a bunch of catchphrases to me out of nowhere, and I'm like, "All right, we got to turn the TV off."
Yes. And then investment companies are going to be companies that are like a Fidelity, or TD Ameritrade. So they're going to be companies that might put together some ETFs or mutual funds for you, give you an opportunity to invest directly into the markets. Your retirement plans, especially if you have a 401k, are going to rely heavily on these investment companies to give you those options or those choices, pardon me, for getting into different assets and asset classes. And I don't like to use the word options, especially when we're talking about
I know.
choices, because
I try to use
options
alternative or choices.
alternatives,
Yeah,
because options are a very special financial product, and we will be talking about them in this course. Okay.
yeah.
So we'll talk very briefly. There are several different financial markets: equities, fixed income, money markets, commodity markets. We could also talk about the futures markets. We could talk about the FX markets. But what we really, most people think about initially when they think about the financial markets, they think about equities. And that's where all of your stocks are going to be. And interesting, that is the probably the smallest market out there
Of
relative.
these, yeah.
Yeah. And what we don't have listed, but I think it's one of the big, or is the biggest, is the foreign exchange market.
Yeah.
So anytime that two countries have any kind of transaction with each other, the currency for the transaction has to hit the FX market. So not only are people trading currency pairs, but every time a transaction hits, it has to be translated. So
Mhm.
every time, let's say, a foreign nation decides to buy US Treasury debt, it's going to hit the FX market, which means that this market is essentially on top of all the other markets and therefore much bigger in size. We also are going to be very interested in the overall economic conditions. And there's a whole host of different types of economic indicators that we can look at. For those of you who follow what some of the things that we do, we talk about inflation quite a bit. We've done a couple videos on unemployment. Financial assets relate to stock prices.
Mhm.
So, for example, we just mentioned that the S&P 500 has had some incredible bull years since 2020. And so as a result, we have much larger, those financial assets are worth substantially more than they were
Mhm.
since 2019. Uh, Housing prices, these also fluctuate with the market. And then consumer prices and our spending. So, for example, if prices are going up, which we know that they are, and your income is not, there's going to be a disparity in how much extra income you have to be able to make future purchases. So that's going to impact your financial decision making for your personal spending. We also have to think about our short-term, intermediate, and our long-term goals. This is something that I'm working on teaching to my small children because right now everything in their world is short-term. We go to the Dollar Tree, we could easily spend an hour thinking about how we're going to spend our short-term spendings. But if you ask them to say, let's not go to the Dollar Tree for 4 days, let's just even use days, 4 or 5 days in a row, we can then, as opposed to going to the Dollar Tree, we can go to Five Below.
You skip
It,
Dollar Tree for 5 days, you can go to Five
go to
Below.
Five
Is
Below,
that what
right?
you're okay?
Yep.
I'm just making sure I'm following here.
And
Yeah.
we can then have an intermediate goal. Again, this would be giving up the daily to have that achieve an additional amount for a weekly spending. Now, as a grown up, we have different types of goals, and our short term goals will probably be 1 to 3 months, perhaps 1 to 6 months. Maybe an intermediate goal is 1 year, 2 year. We're planning a vacation in 2 years from now, so we're saving up for it now.
Mhm.
We anticipate that you're going to need a new car. So you start
Yeah.
thinking about it now and start getting things ready so that when you do need it, it's you're good to go. I have smaller children, so a longer term goal that I have is making sure that there's money set aside for their college education. A lot of adults look at long term goals for their retirement, and it's going to take years, perhaps decades, to build up the wealth that is required for these time periods. A big one that it's we're going to talk about this throughout the entire series because opportunity cost is such an important part of it, and we don't think about it as much as we can. So in the example we talked about when we talked about paying down debt by getting a secondary job, some of the opportunity cost is the time, effort, and your health, right? So if you're working 40 hours at a regular job and then you pick up a weekend job and you're working another, let's say 20 hours and you're putting in 60 hours a week, that takes a physical toll on your body. So it is an opportunity cost because there could be medical bills, there could be other things that are going to be associated with it. There's also financial opportunity cost. If I'm a, for those who don't know me, I like to shop. So if I buy a new Burberry purse, I'm giving up investment opportunity. I'm giving up potential interest from savings. I'm giving up a safety net because Burberry purses are unfortunately a little more expensive than I would like them to be, which is why I'm not buying Burberry purses at this moment. But if you're looking at spending $700 or $800 on a purse, perhaps more, it's an opportunity cost that you are giving up interest, liquidity, and a safety net. So these are the important things to think about.
Yeah. With respect to the time thing, I think that's one of those things that you don't think about until later in life.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And we
Yes.
had you and I worked at Kelly together a few years ago, and there was a professor that retired and passed away like 6 weeks later. And
Yep.
some of the older professors were like, "I don't want that to happen to me," and
Right.
actually started to plan their retirement. Just thinking, I don't, I want to enjoy life a bit before it's over with, and that's something that that I balance out. I've got a decade plus on you, and typically I can be a bit more selective with how I spend my time, and don't necessarily have to do everything professional that comes my way. And looking back on it, there are probably some things that I wish I hadn't done, and had a little bit more time with my family, etc. So I hope we're able to overemphasize that a bit more as we go along through these videos.
And the mental health aspect of it is
Yeah.
so important. And this is something that I know we've alluded to in other videos because we've started speaking to former floor traders. mental health is something that's so important to consider and to
Hmm.
take care of. And it's something that if you're like, well, I really want to pay down this debt, and you start to think about taking on this extra job or doing some things for extra money,
Hmm.
really think out how much can you realistically do and have an end game in mind so that you don't burn out.
Yeah.
No burnouts here. So
Woohoo!
we're gonna end with our yeah, we're gonna end with
Math.
future value and present value. So we're not gonna do much math here. We'll see it later in this course, but we're gonna introduce this idea. And I'm going to draw a timeline because that's what we do. I'm gonna use purple. So today dink, is our present value. And sometime in the future, and this gets a big T, that's our time. This is our future value. Now I'm going to put Dr. Rowe on the spot.
Hmm.
When we think about present value or the spot value, is it often the same as the future value or future price?
It shouldn't be.
So,
No, it's lower. It's present value should be lower than future value.
and the reason why that is because of the time value of money, right? Because it is worth more to us today than sometime in the future. One of the things I like to say to my students is I say, well, if I offered you $100 today or $100 from a year from now, which do you want? And I always enjoy their answers, and they say, oh, I want it today. So, well, why? And because they're trying to impress me, they say, well, we can invest it. We can put that money to work. Okay.
I
$100 isn't going to get you very far, but okay. And
I
I
like the
said,
risk component,
yeah, there is.
which is if I give it to you today beyond finding me in May of 2027 and trying to get that $100 out of me.
Well, and
One of the textbooks, the first thing is certainty. And
right.
I never really thought of it that way. We think of it more at the mathematical level, but it's certainty. $100 sitting on my desk right now, or you promised to give me $100 in a year. I'm certain I'm going to get that $100 from you right now when you hand it to me.
Well, and
Yeah.
I talk about what things that could, so one of the things I said, well, what could happen to me in the next year? And everybody mulls around. I said, I could die. If I'm dead, you're not getting that 100.
Nope.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's gone.
You
Your
could you could go
ability,
work at University of Chicago and they wouldn't be able to find you.
no, I'd
Yeah.
be
See?
completely dead,
Yeah,
so
you'd be
you
gone.
wouldn't be able to get it. So it's worth more to you for that
Yeah.
certainty that you're discussing. And the students get really uncomfortable about hearing about me dying, but it's very possible.
But it's
So
going to happen someday.
it will happen
Yeah.
someday.
That's our taxes and death, and that's
And
pretty much our
taxes and
certainties.
death,
Yep.
they will happen. So if I offer you this, you should take it today, the certainty. Now, simultaneously, and this is what we really care about in finance, is if we've got our timeline again, t equals 0 today, and we have a future cash flow at some point in the maturity or in the future, we want to know what is that cash flow worth today. And this is all about discounting cash flows. So we'll take that present value and we'll divide it by 1 plus the rate to the number of periods. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later throughout this series. But this is a time component, and we're looking at how much is it truly worth to us today, because there's going to be many opportunities out there where we truly do get a future cash flow. We want to know what it's worth today.
Mhm.
And with that, that completes our introductory to this series on personal finance. We looked at what the personal finance goals might be. We looked at the system for making determination of how to achieve those goals. And we also looked at some of the factors that are going to influence our decisions for that. And with
Absolutely.
that, we hope you enjoyed this session. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit like. And if you have not already, please subscribe. And we just thank you for joining us. And thank you, Dr. Rowe.
You betcha. So just keep a heads up for part 2 of this series, or maybe it's already posted.